Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, you are the owner, operator, and czar of the Consensus Board. Are you happy with its performance this last weekend?
You know, I think that it gave it its all. I know it put in a lot of hard work leading up to the draft. And so for it to, have another chance to shine on the biggest stage, I really loved, the effort that it put in. You could see the hard work on the field. But I think the want to, the willingness is something that's kind of irreplaceable. And I think the Consensus Big Board demonstrated that. And of course, from a pure production performance standpoint, the numbers speak for themselves. It was the best performance we've ever seen from the Consensus Big Board. And it is normally a high performing board. So for it to be able to restrict all of the first round picks within the top 50, that's never happened before. For it to be able to restrict the top 100 within the top 300, that's never happened before. Just really phenomenal stuff. 102, that's the first time we went off the board. So I thought that was, and that was pick 302. So that was rank 302. So for the board to have performed like it did, this was like a LeBron James in Game 7 performance. It was just really awesome to see. And
I was going to ask if we had a player comp for this.
Yeah, no, this was a highlight performance. This was a history-making performance for the board. But I don't want to focus on just the numbers and the data and the production, because I think that it also was the biggest performance from a heart perspective, from a command of the field perspective. Certainly was in the zone, took advantage of the momentum. Just a really excellent all-around performance. And then we did see that translate on the field in a really big way. So certainly the winner of the weekend. I really love being able to work with a board like this. It's kind of like, as a coach, it's a dream to be able to work with boards like this. And it's been nothing but a pleasure.
This is it's rewarding, and they say that it's hard to get there, but it's harder to stay there. Is that what you're finding too?
No, 100%. No, absolutely. It's always a difficult journey getting there. Don't get me wrong. It's always tough climbing the mountain, but once you're at the top of the mountain, you see everybody else trying to knock you off of it. And that is so much more difficult to deal with. Everyone's giving you their best shot. Everyone is, finding out specifically kind of what you do and trying to get around it. And then you have to find different ways to be motivated, because before you were motivated by doing something you'd never done before. And that's always a great intrinsic motivation. But now Consensus Big Board, in its eighth year at being around the top of the mountain, it takes a lot of internal motivation, a lot of mental discipline, a lot of emotional energy to be able to consistently go out there and put in the performance that you do. So certainly, I'm not going to knock how difficult it was to get up to the top. That is a Herculean effort. But I think that you're right, that it is even more difficult once you're there to stay there, both internally based on your own kind of motivation, and externally based on how everyone else is kind of, you've got a target on your back,
Yeah, but as we always say around here, winning breeds winning. So you're able to continue your success, and we're all pulling for you here, because that was a lot of heart that was shown out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think one reason that winning tends to breed winning is that you've now established a winning culture in an organization, and no one has done a better job of that than the Consensus Big Board itself. I think that it has done a really phenomenal job as a leader, as a motivator, really great in the locker room, really great as a field general. And I think that the winning culture that it's been breeding since 2015, it really was out on display. So for sure, yeah, 100%.
Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well and are enjoying the fact that the draft is over. We've got stuff to talk about, and Arif has a little bit of room to gloat. So Arif is especially proud of that last part, though.
I'm a proud person.
Yes, that's Yes, proud. Proud is what you are. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. Again, this is going to be our draft recap special. So we hope you all are prepared for our biggest show of the year. This will likely go a little long, so let's sit back, relax, and enjoy this one. This is going to be good. If you enjoy the show and would like to help donate to the show, if you'd like to help us financially, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can head over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. We're going to put out a new bonus episode here in the next couple of days, full of mailbag questions on some fun stories and stuff. So enjoy that. But just want to give a special thank you over on Patreon to Aaron Matson, who upgraded his membership. Thank you very much, Dr. Aaron Matson, and also Chris Marston as well. Thank you so much for signing up. Again, patreon.com/NorseCode gets you access to bonus material and gets you access to the Discord and a number of things we'll be doing over the summer and moving forward. So again, thank you so much. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you want to have like a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and be one of the fine folks out there who have picked up a shirt, a tumbler, a baby onesie. There are, as far as I know, four shower curtains out there. So if you want to be one of the cool kids and get yourself a shower curtain, and Arif, I feel like we could get you one now.
Reproducing? How are there four? The last I heard there were two.
Well, no, there were three, and now there's four. So it's a magical, wonderful place. Droplay Dave has one of them, so that was the third one, and there's a fourth one in Minnesota somewhere.
Good.
They're slowly multiplying. It's like that game Plague Inc. and just as infectious and deadly.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, this won't cause the apocalypse at all. It'll be fine. It's like that scene from the Last of Us TV show where they're just like, you should just bomb us now. That's the only way to fix this. So again, norsecode.threadless.com is your place to go. All right, we're just going right into the show. Welcome. We have plenty of picks. We got some undrafted free agent news. Let's start it off. This was a trade-heavy draft for the Vikings. This was a draft where there were multiple rumors about possibly moving into the top five, or at least to get one of the top five quarterbacks that the Vikings seemed to be in love with. Instead, they ended up picking at number 23, Jordan Addison, wide receiver out of USC. So I guess the first question I have is about all of the trades. Like, it looked for a moment that the Vikings were going to actually pull something off. What happened?
Yeah, so the Vikings, they took like 10 minutes to pick, and it sounded like they actually were entertaining a number of trades down when they got to 23. It sounded like they were actually in also on a couple of the discussions to trade up, but the price was a little bit too expensive. Now that we've gone through a couple of drafts with the Vikings, I wonder if it is the likelihood that they'll always be a little bit hesitant to trade up. That it's always going to be difficult for them to trade up rather than trade down, in part because of the background that they have as like an analytics-heavy front office that is likely to see a lot more value in trades down than trades up. And so values picks later in the draft higher than other teams do relative to picks earlier in the draft. So I wonder if that might play a part in it, their inability to, or it could be an inability to trade up because they can't meet what the market typically demands there. So I wonder if that plays a role. But it sounded like there were a couple of spots throughout the draft that, they were in conversation to trade up. That is my understanding. And so when you get to, pick 23, you don't take 10 minutes because you don't know who you're going to pick. You take 10 minutes because you're genuinely fielding trade offers. And so very clearly it looked like they were going to trade down. I think that on this show, specifically, someone asked, what are the odds the Vikings pick at 23? I don't know what I said specifically, but I think it was close to like 5%. Clearly, I get with a probability you're never wrong, but I feel wrong here, right? It's very clearly that the Vikings tried to move around, but they weren't so locked into the idea of moving around that they did so at whatever cost. And so obviously they liked Jordan Addison. My guess is that they probably liked Jordan Addison as much as a couple of other players. So that's probably what happened there. Unlike what happened with the third pick, I think that they had a target in mind, and they knew that that target was going to slip, and so they kept trading down to do that. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that the Vikings were going to trade, that first pick, and they just didn't find kind of the value for it, which, I don't know kind of what they were offering or what they were offered, so I can't really speak to that. I think Addison, comprises the bottom of a talent cliff at receiver specifically, so I don't really mind, them picking Addison so long as we, presuppose that they're picking a receiver there. I know that in the presser, someone asked like, "Hey, were you at least considering defense? Were you at least considering a cornerback?" And he said, "Yeah, we're considering all positions." So certainly that was on their mind. I know that Deonte Banks went a pick later. It would have been pretty fun to stand for this guy basically the entire draft season and talk about how much I like him. I think ever since the combine, after seeing what he did at the combine and putting on kind of a little bit of his tape. I'm not a huge tape watcher anymore with the draft, unfortunately, but putting on a little bit of his tape, I liked him a lot. So I wonder if Deonte Banks was also in that same range for them. But I think that that's just kind of the story there. We can talk about the picks specifically, but I think that the Vikings are of the mind, right, that all that the draft allocation does for you, all that the draft assignation does really, is give you a certain amount of capital to work with, a certain amount of assets to work with. And then you use those assets to move where you need to move to find kind of the sweet spots in the draft. And so they're never really committed to being where they are in the draft simply because that's where the NFL assigned them. I think that they view the draft as an auction, which I think was first proposed by like Thaley and Romer, at least publicly, like a while ago. And the optics of calling the NFL draft an auction are a little bit suspect, but in terms of like the way that you think about it economically, it makes a lot of sense. It's a blind first bid auction, right? I think even first price auction. I think even Kwesi mentioned use that language. And so that's kind of how they view it. And so they're not content to pick where they pick because where they pick is just a function of how much capital they have. So they're willing to move around a lot. So I think that is a big part of the way that they think about this.
So the Vikings seem to have traded with nearly every team in the league over the last 2 years. And they have picked up a wide receiver, an elusive wide receiver, Jordan Addison out of USC. Yeah,
Addison is pretty fun, honestly. I like watching him. He gets to run away from offenses a lot. He had a bunch of yards after the catch, like you alluded to. One thing that kind of sticks out to me, so we'll talk about the weight and the speed in a second, but one thing that sticks out to me was I was reporting on a story, an analytics story, and at one point I talked to somebody who had worked fairly closely with receivers at LSU, which obviously that includes, Justin Jefferson, right? He's worked with a number of pretty good receivers, it turns out. And we were talking about like the ways that the metrics that we have available to us kind of help predict success. And I was like, well, one of the things that I found personally is that when you're a smaller receiver, it's actually kind of relevant to the Addison conversation. When you're a smaller receiver, that pure speed matters a lot. And the guy goes, yeah, of course. I think that if you don't have one kind of trump card, you need another kind of trump card. But pure speed can be you can make up for not having pure speed as a small receiver by having a lot of agility. And, we went back and forth. And the one thing that he shared with me was that the thing that tends to be, it's not measured, so we don't tend to have a very good way to really think about this. But one thing that he's found that predicts receiver quality really well is deceleration speed, which I know that at the Senior Bowl, Zebra Systems, or whatever they call themselves, the people working with the chips, have produced deceleration metrics. So that's like something that's available in some instances. But deceleration speed matters much more than acceleration or top speed, which I found pretty interesting because that was kind of the conversation that I was having with people about Laquan Treadwell when he was drafted, because he may not have had a lot of speed, period, right? But he had really great deceleration. And obviously it didn't turn out. And so I talked to him a little bit about that. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, any statistical evaluation of traits that correlate with success they're going to have, non-hits based off of a particular trait. Obviously, you want to combine a number of traits together to see if you can get a better, more fully complete picture, so you get a good probability of kind of what that receiver is going to be capable of doing. And so, there's that. But he was talking about how, like, the things that separated, like, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and Justin Jefferson were their ability to stop, to be sudden. And very often, when you have 4-2-1 guys, you don't have that kind of suddenness. And he said that Tyreek Hill is actually a really interesting exception to that rule, because he does have suddenness. He does have deceleration capability. And it's not because the faster you go, the harder it is to decelerate, because the metric that he's talking about in terms of deceleration is dynamic. It takes into account how fast you're going, right? So it's not pure deceleration. You can't, like, run a 4.8 and have a really high deceleration score, and that helps you. But the reason that a lot of these 4.21, 4.25, 4.26 guys sometimes have difficulty with deceleration is because they weren't taught that, because either, like, kind of internally or externally, that, internally they have this understanding, right, that the thing that has been separating them, the thing that people have been highlighting them for, have been putting them on highlight reels for, have been recruiting them for, and have been talking them up for, and have been paying them for, right, is their pure speed. If you run like a 4.4, right, if you run a 4.45, you're one of the fastest high school recruits in the country, you're going to be a 5-star probably, unless you've got, like, some of these other issues. Now, if you turn into a 4.26 guy, your entire life you've been asked to go fast. Not a lot of people have talked to you about decelerating, about route running and stuff like that. And so the receivers that tend to separate themselves do a very good job at deceleration. I brought all of this up because that, to me, on film, is one of the things that Jordan Addison does extraordinarily well. He's a really good sudden route runner. And I think Dane Brugler used that word sudden or suddenness in his route running to describe what he does. And a lot of times people will think about it in terms of comeback routes and curl routes, but it's true for a number of routes, right? If you can't decelerate quickly, your double moves are going to suck, right? If you can't decelerate quickly, your breaks in and out of, like, a dig route, like a square in, that's going to be really difficult, because either you have to take a while to gear down and now you're screwing up the timing, or you're going to be rounding off your routes, or you're going to have to learn specific techniques like speed cuts. So I think that is a reason to be kind of excited about Jordan Addison. Now, this conversation about his speed and his weight is really interesting to me. So he's a 173. I forget what the official. I mean, there is no official weight, but what he weighed in at.
Yeah, he's a smaller receiver, which kind of flies in the face of a couple of things.
Right. So it's pretty rare for a smaller receiver. So, yeah, 173 turns out. It's pretty rare for a smaller receiver. And he weighed 170 at his pro day, by the way. So he didn't gain weight for his pro day. He lost weight. It's pretty rare for a light receiver to do pretty well. It just, like, full stop, light receiver, really difficult to find that guy putting up wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 numbers, right? There are there's exceptions to every rule, right? So you could take a look at somebody like a Marquise Brown. I think it was like 160 pounds, right? Or you could take a look at, like, John Brown or some of these other guys. I mean, there are lighter receivers that have done pretty well and have produced at a fairly decent level. But I will say, for those receivers, not a lot of them have great total production. Normally, I don't really care about total production. I care about efficiency, yards per route run, stuff like that. But, like, it's relevant if the reason that you're missing games is because you're hurt, right? Marquise Brown did get hurt a lot, right? That's just something to kind of consider. And the other thing is, if you take a look at a bunch of really light receivers, you take a look at every receiver who's, I think the cutoff that a lot of people use is 185. I think that's pretty fair. Take a look at receivers who all weighed in below 185. They ran fast 40s, the ones that succeeded. And so this is what I was talking about when I was talking to that guy that worked with LSU receivers. In the NFL, historically, if you're small and you're not fast, you're out. That's it, basically. And so, you take a look at that list, and it's a bunch of guys that ran 4.42 or faster. And that's kind of where a concern is. So you take a look at the way Jordan Addison played, both at Pitt and at USC. So at Pitt, he won the Blitnikoff Award. He led the FBS in receiving touchdowns. He was among the leaders in total receiving yards. He had 100 receptions there. You take a look at USC, and you saw that he had nearly 900 receiving yards. He was first team All Pac-12, but he missed a couple of games because of his ankle, right? So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Extremely reliable producer both on the inside and on the outside. The concern here from a size perspective is both this injury concern, right? And then also whether or not he's got the ability to line up on the line of scrimmage, like an X receiver, right? And you don't have to be A.J. Brown to line up on the line of scrimmage and face press coverage. So just real quick, you got your X receiver, you've got your Z receiver. Your X receiver is because the NFL rules require you to have 7 players on the line of scrimmage and then the rest of your players off the line of scrimmage, right? You have one receiver usually that is on the line of scrimmage that the cornerback is within a yard of at the snap. And so that's when a lot of press jam occurs. Your flankers or your Z receivers are going to be off the line of scrimmage. Your slot receivers are almost always off the line of scrimmage because you've got your tight end on the line of scrimmage. So your 5 offensive linemen, tight end, and your X receiver. Your Z receiver is off the line of scrimmage. That's how a lot of people thought, for example, Stephon Diggs needed to play in the NFL. And for a long time, that's kind of what he did. Now, in 2 receiver sets, Adam Thielen would very often be kind of the X receiver, and then he would be in the slot in 3 receiver set. So it was a little bit different. But and Diggs is fine as an X receiver. I'm just using that as an example of how early in his career he was perceived. Your goal is to get off that jam if they do choose to jam you at the line of scrimmage and get open, right? You don't have to be A.J. Brown. You don't have to be Jamar Chase. You don't have to bully people at the line of scrimmage to do it. You have to have a really excellent release to be able to do it. But if you're lighter, your release is only going to get you so far, right? So you could, if they make contact with you, and inevitably they will, you need some way to deal with that contact. And the stronger you are, and Jefferson is crazy strong for his size, the stronger you are, the more you're going to be able to handle that. That's not 100%. Again, Tyreek Hill is a fine X receiver, right? Smaller, lighter, and in this case, the speed is not as huge an asset. His release is really good. And so you're asking Addison to have a really great release or to be kind of limited in his role. He played both inside and outside in college, but he didn't face a lot of press because that's just not something that is available in college, not a ton of press coverage. And so he has, I think, the physical traits to be a really excellent release off the line of scrimmage guy, but he doesn't have it technically yet. He's got the capability physically, but he doesn't have all of the release techniques. Now, all of the other kind of route running things that he does, really excellent at that. The area that he would need work on is that release. So that, I think, is a concern from a size perspective. Now, the speed thing is really interesting. So I have mentioned a couple of times that you need to be fast if you're small, and we don't have remarkable data on his speed that is useful to us. So there is some private data that the Vikings allegedly have, right? You know, one of our listeners asked a question about, you know, PFF and PFF mentioning that there's tracking data on him. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the publicly available data that we have, to me, is not reliable because Jordan Addison ran a 40. He ran 2 40s. He ran a 4.5 something and then a 4.49. And then he jumped 34 at the combine and then 10.2 at the broad jump. But he shut down his combine. So a lot of players did not run agilities at the combine so that they could focus on working out specifically for the agility drills when it came to their pro day. That was not, my understanding is, not Addison's plan. My understanding is that when he ran the 40, his back tightened up and he attempted to do some of these other drills and then he had to shut it down. Now that is potentially just information from the agent who's trying to save him. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt, but there is something here to say, hey, maybe that didn't help us. And you would hope that somebody who has that problem runs at their pro day. Unfortunately, you know, he chose not to run at his pro day, and that's the smart thing to do because his pro day was flooded out. Like USC's pro day was still held outdoors, and they just had a ton of rain. And so the pro day results, were they available to us at all, would not have been reliable. And so he stood on his combine runs. He still ran routes outside at his pro day. And my understanding is that he did actually a really excellent job running in the rain, running routes at the pro day. So that's, pretty good that he was able to do that. He ran good agility drills. I don't know if the agility drills were held inside or outside, but I believe they were held outside, but not great. They were like pretty good. So we don't have a reliable understanding of what his 40 is. Now, the tracking data would apparently suggest, I haven't looked at it, this is like third-hand reporting at this point, that he was a 90th percentile speed athlete in the draft. That would be great. This was a pretty fast draft in terms of receiver speed. So 90th percentile would be fantastic. He definitely looks like a player that, when you watch him on the field, seems to have an extra gear. And mind you, Justin Jefferson ran like a 4.52 or something like that, and he plays faster than that. Jefferson, bigger guy than Addison, so again, the speed question is a little bit different for the two of them. But that's just something to kind of keep in mind. One last issue. So I do want to mention, as a route runner, it's more than just, so I'm not going to mention the issue. I'll get there in a second. It's more than just that he is slippery, that he's agile, that, he can get in and out of his breaks really quickly, the suddenness thing that I mentioned. He, like, from a mental and technical perspective, he's a really great route runner. Like the techniques, for example, like sinking your hips on the dig route, or, making sure that you've got a very consistent number of steps on your comeback, right? Where you kind of angle your feet coming off of a curl, right? All of the technical element, really high level, really polished stuff. The mental aspect, also really, really impressive. So he has an understanding of what defensive backs are trying to do, and he attacks that in a way that, again, I'm going to bring up Stephon Diggs, just in this element, reminds me of Stephon Diggs. Now, he's not as explosive in the same way. Like, Diggs would be a very exaggerated, exploding out of your routes kind of route runner. But he's more explosive in that capacity than, say, Adam Thielen. And he had a really good understanding of where their eyes were going to be, how they reacted to certain routes, how they were going to react to routes that he was playing off of. And he would exploit that. He would figure out where their blind spots were, run into them, and then run out of them as they reacted to that. Had a pretty good understanding of what defenses were trying to do overall. So it wasn't just, up against an individual corner. He had an understanding of how they were attempting to use their leverage. He was an understanding of where the safeties were positioned and what that defense meant, where the linebackers were positioned and what that defense meant about where he should go. He was really good at finding space. So as a route runner, aside from that release issue, he's really phenomenal. And the final issue, aside from that size concern, is the drops. I don't know what to do with them because he had a lot of drops at Pitt. Now, I don't want to exaggerate it more than I need to. 11 drops with 100 receptions is a pretty decent drop rate. It's about 10% because it's not 11 divided by 100. It's 11 divided by 111. It's about 10%, right? That's not awful, right? But the previous, in 2020, it was 10 out of 60, or 10 drops and 60 receptions, so 10 out of 70. That's a little bit of a concern. 1 out of 7, that's like 14%, 14.3%. That's a little bit of a concern. But then at USC, 2 drops with 59 receptions, so 2 out of 61, right? So that's 3%. That's pretty great. Historically, your career drops, and this includes college to NFL projection, your career drops will predict things more in terms of drop rate than your final year drops. But this is such a dramatic shift, 14, 10, 3, right, in terms of percentage, that you could potentially say, hey, there's something here. He's kind of learned to look the ball in. He says, that this was an area of emphasis for him. But a lot of people say that, right? So I don't know if that's a concern, but certainly I think that's something to kind of keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, the Brugler scouting report says he's more of a body catcher. So from a technical perspective, there's some concerns about his ability to kind of catch difficult passes and stuff like that. So that's, something to keep in mind. But it's really 2.5 concerns. I say half because one of them is related to the other. One is the drop rate. The other is the size. And the related concern to the size is the release. At least based off of what I'm sure a lot of people really like his release. So I could be wrong about that. But really great understanding of space. The problem is you've got like 100 strengths and 3 negatives or something. It doesn't stack up like that. The problem is sometimes 1 or 2 of those negatives is so overwhelming compared to the rest that that's what matters. Like if you have a quarterback who's perfect at everything, except he's not poised under pressure, you're done. That guy, you can't rely on that guy. In this way, the size could be that concern. I don't know. I've seen a couple of people compare him to other people that had like a low RAS score and all that. I don't. People are not doing a great job of comparisons. And part of it's because our sample is so low that we don't have a lot of great comparisons for a player drafted in the first round who weighs 173 that has an official combine or official 40-yard dash of 4.49, but who knows how good that is. That's a pretty small sample, and so how we draw these comparisons becomes really difficult. Like you end up comparing him to like a bunch of third round picks. And of course, the third round picks didn't do as well as you'd want a first round pick to do. They were third round picks. Evidently, what he put on film was good enough to be drafted in the first round despite these concerns. So it is really difficult to have a good conversation about his comparables. But those are putting that all out there. I think it's a good pick. I have concerns. He did drop to 23 for a reason. Would I expect him to outproduce, a hypothetical Adam Thielen this year? Yes. Is he going to be a first round quality receiver? I would say the odds are yes, but it is. I don't know what to do with the size thing. So it is a question mark, but overall, I like the pick. I don't think it's like a home run pick. No, real quick before Mekhi Blackmon, I did find the contested catch rate in the PDF. I just had to scroll down a page. Still, by the way, still bad format. It is 22.2%, which is one of the lowest percentages among the draftable receivers. Also, they have like these little bar charts of just like random traits. Don't love it. Speed, 7 out of 10. Route running, 9 out of 10. Physicality, 3 out of 10. Ball skill / body control, 4 out of 10. Elusiveness, 6 out of 10. That's not, what is that? That's, you made stuff up. Thanks. Anyway, Mekhi Blackmon, don't love the pick.
Let's go into Mekhi Blackmon here. Mekhi Blackmon, cornerback, USC, round 3, number 102. A lot of trades to get to this point, and the Vikings did not have a second round pick. Rumors that they were trying to get into the second round, but stayed for round 3, number 102. Mekhi Blackmon, cornerback, a position of great need for the Vikings out of USC. 2 people from USC this draft.
Yeah, there were a couple of team pairs in this draft, right? This one also interesting for the same pro day related reasons that it's like pretty difficult to use that kind of data. I also found it really interesting that the Vikings, they pick at 87. Riley Moss goes like 2-3 picks ahead. Something that I had to be reminded of on the Minnesota Football Party. And then no cornerbacks were selected between that and the trade down to 102. And so if the Vikings were intent on selecting a cornerback here, they did a great job at figuring out that their guy wasn't going to go because no cornerbacks were selected. So they didn't miss out on specifically a corner. Now, if they were like interested in, for example, Siaki Ika, which I'd kind of doubt, or like Ricky Stromberg, which I also kind of doubt, I guess they missed out on those guys. But realistically, not a huge concern. So they very clearly got the guy that they were targeting. Perhaps they wanted Garrett Williams. Perhaps they wanted Riley Moss. And both of them went like earlier than the Vikings selected, right? But really soon after, 2-3 picks after, Jacorian Bennett goes. He's the other Maryland corner. I kind of liked him too, even more athletic than Deonte Banks. Not as good, obviously. I mean, he went later. And Keely Ringo, who was ranked 38th on the consensus big board, drops all the way to 105 for the Eagles. Now, the Eagles say that I think that they said they had a second round grade on him, or they maybe had a first round grade on him. I don't believe them. The Eagles passed on him. But, it's something to kind of keep in mind. Typically, when teams say we had a blank grade on them, they're not really lying, but what it means and what we mean by that versus what they mean by that are usually a little bit different. Now, when teams say top blank player on our board, very often I found, based off of the way reporters have been able to kind of dig on that technically is not quite true. But we had a blank grade on them. Technically, that is almost always true. So this is something to keep in mind. But, you had a number of corners that on the consensus board, and we'll talk about the consensus board a lot in the mailbag. So, if you want to have that discussion, we'll have it later. But on the consensus board, immediately after Blackman was picked, two other players much higher on the consensus board were selected. Players that have a different set of concerns, obviously, but certainly don't have the concerns I have regarding Blackman. And then later on in the same round, Darius Rush goes at pick 138. So the same round as Keely Ringo, Ja'Cory Bennett. Obviously not the same round as the last pick of the draft, but the last pick of that round. But these are all players that were not only ranked higher on the board, but personally, I just liked more. And so we can talk about kind of what that looks like. First, let's go to the excellently designed PFF guide. And again, luckily, Mekhi Blackman has a last name that starts with B, and so he's pretty high on the page ranking inside this PDF. Sorry, come on, man. But let's talk about kind of the way that I perceive this player. So this is a guy that played pretty well last year. I mean, I don't want to lead with something that isn't not true or doesn't speak to why the Vikings wanted to draft this guy. I mean, he played pretty well last year. He led the Pac-12 in pass deflections. He was first team all Pac-12. He had his hand on the ball a number of times. Only came away with 3 interceptions. It doesn't really bother me too much based off of watching him play a little bit. But, he's a guy that ran a 4.47 and then also did it at 178 pounds. Now, the cornerback speed thing is a little bit different than the wide receiver speed thing. If you are a big wide receiver and you run a 4.6, I'm just not as concerned, especially if you've got good explosions, right? If you are any cornerback and you run a 4.6, I don't care if you're 220 pounds, you're not a cornerback to me. You can't. Speed is much more, and this is both conventional wisdom and based off of my research, something that turns out to be true. Speed is a necessity at cornerback. And so if his 4.47 is genuine, right, that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, Luke and I had a little bit of confusion about whether or not it was Mekhi Blackman or whether or not it was Jordan Addison who had to shut down their combine because of injury. And I didn't get any clarity on whether or not Mekhi Blackman ever did, but I do know that Jordan Addison did. I looked that one up a little bit later. But I didn't find any specific reporting, taking a quick look, specific reporting on his combine and shutting it down and injury and stuff like that. And so I am going to continue with the presumption that his combine was genuine because he didn't seem to ever feel the need to shut it down. So I'll say that. And if a listener knows of something else, correct me. But I'm going to start with the presumption that the 4.47 is a concern. 4.47 is not slow, but it's not really that fast. And then you add in that he doesn't meet an arm length threshold. He's 31 inches. He doesn't meet a weight threshold. He's 178 pounds. He doesn't meet a height threshold, 5'11". It is a little bit concerning. Now, his bench press, pretty great, 11. That's pretty rare for a corner, especially at 178 pounds. I am concerned because he feels it out a lot. And by that, I mean he plays with less technique and more intuition, which at a lot of positions I think is really great. I think that, for example, at receiver, we can confuse good intuition for poor technique when that's not really the case. I think at quarterback, we can overemphasize good technique. I think you always need to have it, but we tend to underplay how important intuition is. At linebacker, again, all these positions require technique, but I just think that intuition is a little bit more important. At cornerback, that is, I think, a little bit less true. Kind of feeling out what the receiver is going to do and then reacting to it, I think works at a college level in a way that it doesn't quite work at an NFL level. And I think someone who really helped me understand that a lot was actually Mike Zimmer, right? The way that he was able to take cornerbacks that were fairly instinctive in the way that they played with a lot of intuition and hammered in technique in a way that really improved their games and allowed them to overcome serious problems like, I mean, they would take a lot of cornerbacks that did not have agility, like Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes, and through technical coaching, created that capacity for them. And so they'd be able to play in man coverage because of speed turns as a zone receiver, speed turns that replicated man coverage type techniques in zone. I am a little bit concerned because when you're not a technically sound corner, what happens is your feet are leveraged incorrectly off of the line of scrimmage or at the snap, where it is easier for receivers to attack your leverage and more difficult for you to turn around. And it is really difficult for intuition to make up that gap because you are a reactor instead of a creator, right? And it's kind of the same way with like offensive linemen, right? You're a reactor instead of a creator. And so what technique does is it gives you a foundation to respond to a wide variety of things. Intuition allows you to create, to get into space, to find new ways to do something. Technique allows you to react to something in a lot of ways. And I think that's why I prefer a higher level of technical capability in offensive linemen and cornerbacks than I do in like wide receivers and say edge rushers or linebackers, right? So that means that you're wrong-footed when a receiver's entering your blind spot and now you're falling down or you're turning your hips too early or you have to, parlay your recovery speed. And the problem is, if you've got bad technique, you sometimes athletically can make up for it with recovery speed. And I didn't see that from Blackman when playing. He is just average in terms of speed. His recovery speed didn't seem to be, up there. And when you've got a player that is lightweight, that is slower, and that, unlike Addison, is 24 years old, right? Now you've got a player where you don't have a lot of time to, or a lot of room to teach. Because if they haven't learned good technical cornerback play in the last 5 years, and they've been at an FBS institution with FBS college coaches, and I understand Colorado, really awful coaching situation just in terms of how poorly they were coached, which, maybe that's something we should keep in mind. Where are you going to be, right? Someone asked, why does age matter? And they asked pretty rudely, so I responded kind of rudely. And I quote tweeted it with like, "Hey, the data tells us that players who enter the draft older are worse. That's what the data tells us." Now, there's a number of possible reasons, and I went into a couple of reasons, and someone really dug into one of those reasons. And what I should have said is, "Hey, this is just one of many reasons. It may or may not be true. Here's why I think that it might be relevant." And instead I said, "Here's why." And I'm still right. But don't get me wrong. I'm obviously correct. But the point I wanted to make was that there's a lot of reasons it could be the case. And one of those reasons could be, for example, that you're just less likely to be able to absorb new information, especially at a subliminal level, and not like subliminal messaging, but like as a non-active processing level. And I'm really happy that when I tweeted this out, I had a couple of people that were studied in cognition that backed me up, because you can, read studies or look at some stuff and come away with a conclusion. That's one thing, but it's another thing when multiple people with backgrounds in cognitive studies back you up on that. So that was nice. But
it's why the Brandon Whedon pick was so weird. Because everyone just looked at him and went, yeah, he's old. Like, very, very old.
Yeah, like what capacity do you have to teach him stuff, right? Like is the thing. And you just have less plasticity in being able to incorporate that kind of information. Now, it's all probabilities, right? It is not impossible for someone who's 24 to learn all the technical things that they need to learn to play cornerback. Obviously, it's just more difficult, and the odds are stacking up against you. And these are all kind of potentially marginal changes, right? It's not like you go from it's there to it's not there. You go on a sliding scale. And so if you have a raw receiver at 20 or a raw cornerback at 20, their percentage odds of being able to absorb the technical skills that they need in order to succeed, let's say arbitrarily that's 60%. Let's say we got him in the second round, so it's 60%. And he's 20. At 24, that could be, instead of 60%, it could be 50%. Maybe that's dramatic. It could be 55, but it could be 50%, right? Now that's just another thing that changes the possibilities. And so you need to hope that the other things that guy has make up for it and increase your odds for the whole thing to work out, right? And so, for example, maybe that 20-year-old cornerback, maybe they're young, and so you get that 60% chance of them learning the technique they need to in order to be successful, but they're not that athletic. And so the overall chances of them being successful have decreased. And so you've got 60% of one category, but maybe only 40% of another. Well, so now you've got this guy who their ability to absorb new technique, maybe we're putting that at 50%, but they're so athletic that their odds of succeeding athletically in the NFL could be 80%. And now, you multiply those two probabilities together, and that's a higher probability of overall success. Great. So you need basically something to make up for these small changes, and I just don't see that for Blackman. There's just a bunch of filters or a bunch of checks that he doesn't check off in terms of the list. He's a one-year wonder. He only had really good play in his final year of college. Now, he always had an instinct for getting his hands on the ball, I will say that. But just in terms of his overall level of play, when you take a look at his PFF grades, they were all pretty bad bad for a draft prospect, not like bad for the FBS. They're all pretty bad relative to what we're looking for up until this final year, right? And another reason that age kind of matters is you don't reach your athletic peak until you're about 28. It depends on the sport and specifically the position within the sport, but 28 is a pretty good proxy for what I'm attempting to communicate here, which is that a 20-year-old will have an athletic advantage against 18-year-olds. A 24-year-old will have a massive athletic advantage against 18-year-olds. And so, especially you've got like 5 years in a college weight room. I get for him, it's like 4 because he also did community college at the College of San Mateo. But you've got 5 years in a college weight room with FBS level strength coaching, which that is good, right? Like the FBS may be bad at coaching certain positions or certain techniques or whatever, but their strength coaching, generally speaking, is quite good. And so his advantage against 19-year-olds is going to make him look better on film. Your 20-year-old doing the same thing now has a larger athletic ceiling to unlock. And when they get into the NFL, by the time they're 23 and they're going up against 25-year-olds, they'll have caught up. Whereas your 24-year-old is nearer to their athletic peak. They've got less of an athletic ceiling to unlock, and now they're up against 25, 26-year-olds, and that advantage kind of disappears in a big way that they're not going to be able to regain. That's another reason, right? There's all kinds of flags with this guy. The speed is an issue. The arm length is not. I mean, he doesn't have short arms, but 31 is below the statistical threshold that I found that helps predict cornerback success. So that's a flag. The height is a little bit of an issue. But he has a good understanding of kind of what receivers are trying to do. He has a good understanding of where the ball is in the air. He sees the ball really, really well. He's got a great attitude for playing. I mean, I think that's pretty important. He definitely is stronger than his size. I mean, that's a huge thing. And he's got, I mean, he earns the confidence of his coaches, right? Because they kept on matching him up against high-level receivers in the Pac-12. And so all of that, he knows how to use the sideline. All of that helps, right? And he played with a level of fluidity that's really important. But all of these flags really bother me. And so somebody who didn't play as well at the things that the Vikings would ask them to do, like a Keely Ringo, drafted a couple of picks later, I think would likely have been a better pick, even though Ringo's physical profile suggests that he's probably only a zone corner. And I talked about that on the Minnesota Football Party, but that is kind of overall my read on Blackman, is that I'm a little bit concerned about who this guy is and what he can do. He played in a man coverage scheme. He played really well at USC. He has a lot of anticipation. He can see the ball in the air. And he's physical, and he's got like some, he's got a flag issue that bothers me a little bit less. But those are all reasons there are reasons to see him succeeding, but I think that there are just more reasons to think that there's a red flag here. And I think that, so he had a very low variance. And this is something I want to do a better study of next year for the consensus big board, is if you've got a guy who's a reach, but he's high variance, is that different than when you've got a guy who's a reach and he's a low variance? He had a pretty low variance in terms of, so a bunch of analysts thought he should have been ranked near the 180s. Now, if you've got a reach, and maybe a good example of that is Siaki Ika from Baylor, right? He was a steal, so maybe that's actually a pretty bad example by the consensus board. How about, nope, that was a steal too. I'm looking for like these volatile reaches that had like a really high variance score. Broderick Martin, there we go, the Detroit Lions. So he was picked at 96th overall by the Lions. He was ranked 260th on the consensus board, but he had more variance in his rankings. More people put him inside the top 100 than the number of people that put Mekhi Blackman in the top 100. And so maybe that's meaningful, right? But he's a low variance guy that a lot of people watched and said should not be in the top 150. I think that that's pretty meaningful. And our evidence suggests, and we'll talk about more about that in the consensus board stuff in the mailbag, our evidence suggests that that's a concern.
All right, let's talk about the next pick. Round 4, number 134, Jay Ward, cornerback out of LSU. So 2 cornerbacks in a row.
Kind of. So Ward, in a lot of draft guides, is listed as a safety. I don't remember how the Vikings announced him. They might have announced him as a cornerback, and he played a lot of cornerback at LSU. If I could just take a look at the Vikings website, right? So if I just Google Vikings picks, it'll probably take me there. But he was a super versatile player. He played in the box. He played high as a free safety. He played the nickel as a slot, and occasionally he would play on the outside as well, especially in prior years. I think that this is the year that they decided to make him more of a safety. Okay, so the Vikings listed him as a safety, but that actually doesn't have much to do with how the Vikings seemingly intend to use him. So if you watch the presser that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did on the day 3 picks, he mentioned that the Vikings scouting group all put together their best fit positions for this guy. And so they said, hey, what is the best position for Jay Ward? What is his ceiling at that position? What do you think he's going to turn out to be? And they listed 3 different positions for him, or not collectively. Individually, a bunch of people submitted their best position, and 3 different positions came to the top pretty consistently. And also consistently at all 3 of those positions, the scouting group saw him as a potential starter, which I don't know kind of where on that grade that is, right? Because it could be pretty high praise, potential starter, right? Or it could be, 6th or 7th on the grading list behind like Hall of Famer, Pro Bowler, impact player, day 1 player, potential starter, right? So, it depends on kind of what the grading rubric is for that language, but, not bad, right? To come away thinking that this guy has the ability to be a nickel corner, an outside corner, and a free safety, or a free safety, a nickel corner, and a box safety, or something like that, right? So there's something interesting to work with here. Now, as a nickel corner, the speed is less of a concern. He ran a 4.55, and I believe that is pretty close to kind of who he is. He's got a lot of length. He has 32.5-inch arms that passes that threshold I mentioned. He's 6 feet, 6 6/8, I think. 6 feet and 6/8 inches. He's a little bit lighter at 188, but it's not 173. And the cutoff of 185 that applied to receivers also in my research seems to apply to cornerbacks that you want on the outside. Now, if he's on the inside, 188 is absolutely fine. So these are all kind of interesting, and his broad jump was 11 feet with only a vertical of 36. I don't really know how that happens because they're pretty tightly correlated, and he did both of those at both the combine and the pro day. So I'm curious about that. But generally speaking, I have found that broad jump does correlate well to performance at safety. So does, unfortunately, short shuttle, and he ran a 4.35. That's not very fast, and his 3-cone of 7.31 was a bit of a concern. But there are things to like and things to not like. I mean, of course, he was drafted on day 3, so, there's a lot there. But he is a very physical player. He does really great at the catch point. I know that his pass deflection numbers weren't like the world's highest, but I think that was more a function of the position he was asked to play. If he'd played pure corner, I think the pass deflection numbers would be even higher. But he is not. I don't think the Vikings will use him as an outside corner. I think that they'll try to implement some really creative stuff with Brian Flores in the defense. So I think that when you've got players like Lewis Seen and Cameron Bynum and potentially Jay Ward and Harrison Smith at safety, and you've got, Byron Murphy who's inside-outside capable, Mekhi Blackman, who they think is inside-outside capable, Andrew Booth and Akelo Evans, you have, and especially because the linebacker group is not the world's most interesting, right? Like Jordan Hicks, not a lot of people are excited about him. Brian Asamoah had a pretty great year as a rookie, but we really don't know what his ceiling is going to be or even what his floor is. You've got a lot of opportunity to put extra defensive backs on the field and be pretty interesting about it, especially, given that they might have some blitzing capability, right? And so you put a lot of defensive backs on the field and you can create opportunities for people like Jay Ward and Cameron Bynum to contribute in a pretty meaningful way and kind of see how that defense evolves. To me, this guy is primarily going to be a special teamer, and they're going to see, kind of what fits best for him. The speed issue, I think, as an outside corner, that's going to be, a concern. But I think that his versatility provides you with shadow depth, right? Because if you're weak on corners and you've got a bunch of safeties that you like, you can move one of your safeties to corner without being overly concerned about, having to grab a guy off the street who doesn't know your defense or anything like that. But as a special teamer, I mean, he's been pretty well lauded at LSU for his special teams capability. Blocked a couple of field goals. He played a number of special teams positions on punt coverage, and so there's a lot there that I think that you can like, and I think that he's going to be a really potentially a high level special teamer. He's supposed to tackle really well, and so I think that I don't dislike the pick. I don't see the ceiling that the Vikings see. But I do think that he provides value. I think that he was by consensus overdrafted. If I want to take a quick look at the consensus board again and say, yeah, so he was picked. No, he was underdrafted. So he was picked 134 and he was 179. So yeah, he was overdrafted. And so I think that reflects that he's probably going to be a special teamer in the NFL. I know that the Vikings have a lot of use plans for him potentially. And so as a player on the team, I don't really mind it. I think at pick 134, especially with Darius Rush going a couple of picks later, or Cameron Mitchell even, it doesn't strike me as good. I don't know. I think Jamie Robinson from Florida State, who went a couple of picks after as well, is probably a more interesting, versatile safety to use. So those are my thoughts. They use him in a lot of ways. To me, I don't think that he grades as a potential starter at any of those spots. I think he's more of a jack of all trades, master of none, and you can use that guy. I just don't know if I would have used pick 134 on that kind of guy.
Well, let's talk about the next pick. The next pick was Jaquilin Roy, defensive tackle out of LSU. This is round 5, pick 141, and he kind of just based on tape, it looks like he plays everywhere.
Yeah. And this and the next pick after this are both. First of all, they're both from USC. Both have an element of versatility in them that is really appealing. I think that him having played everywhere is nice. I don't see him doing that at the NFL level. And sometimes you see that, right? I think a really good example of that is Foya Luakun, who's now a Jaguar, but was drafted by the Falcons, he did everything. He was a safety, he was a slot corner, he was a linebacker, he was an edge rusher. He did everything at Yale because Yale didn't have the world's best football players, right? It's no longer 1893 when they did. But in the NFL, he was just a linebacker. He's good at it, but he was just a linebacker, right? And I think the same thing can be kind of said here for Jaquelin Roy. I think that it was great that he rushed off the edge. It's great that he played 3. It's great that he played 4. It's great that he played the 1. To be kind of a nose tackle that also has the ability to kind of shoot gaps, that also has the ability to bend around the edge at a college level, I think that that's great. At the NFL, I don't think that he has the athleticism to be anything but a run-stopping 3, a run-stopping 4, or a small nose or something like that. So there's use here, but I would have really preferred that the Vikings find somebody that has pass rush capability that's more obvious instead of untapped. Because I feel like, and again, this spans multiple regimes, so maybe it's not fair, but I have gotten so used to the Vikings getting a guy that is not good at rushing the passer and saying, yeah, but he has the traits. Yeah, we can see him rush the passer. Yeah, when you take a look at these splits here, it tells us he can rush the passer.
It's the Anthony Barr syndrome.
Well, I mean, he can rush the passer. Or do you mean moving him to linebacker?
I mean moving him to linebacker. I mean picking up somebody in the draft that was this like, he is athletic as hell, and we will find a place for him.
Right, yeah. And I think all of that kind of matters, but like it just hasn't worked out. And I think that you're right. It's very similar. And like maybe, this is just I pay attention to the Vikings more than most other teams. And so when I see them fail in that respect, it stands out to me a little bit more. But it's like I was told Dalvin Tomlinson could rush the passer really well, and he didn't. I was told a little bit, not as much, that Harrison Phillips could turn into a pretty good pass rusher from the nose. And he's not. He's a good player, but he can't, right? I was told that about Shamar Stephen. Wrong, right? I was told that about a lot of defensive tackles that have come in when it's like, yeah, they're good run stuffers, and that's hard to find, but you can teach them pass rush. I mean, evidently you can't. And so I am a little bit skeptical that somebody who ran an 8-second 3-cone and a 5-second short shuttle, he ran a 4.75 second at the pro day, but like a 5-second short shuttle is a pass rusher, because those are the workouts that correlate best to pass rushing. So I'm a little bit concerned there. He doesn't have he had 4 career sacks, which like the difference between like him and Danielle Hunter also having, I think he had 3.5 or 4 career sacks. The difference between him and Danielle Hunter, also from LSU, is that Hunter specifically was asked not to rush. He was asked to stop the run first. Second, he had the athletic traits to rush the passer. This guy kind of doesn't. And so that bothers me. But he's a 5th round pick, so there's like only so much that it's gonna be a big issue. But based on the Vikings' need profile, I would have liked that. Now, as just a run stuffer, as a football player that's going to be asked to stop the run, and the Vikings are going to find other ways to rush the passer, there's a lot here to like. He's well conditioned for a guy that stops the run, but he's got really powerful hands, right? And so he's got the ability to kind of jolt guards and centers off of their track in the run game. He's got the ability to hold up against them when they try to torque him on base blocks in the run game. He does really, really well at staying stout against both double teams and single teams. And he does a really good job of getting low. And so he's got really great lower body explosion. So for example, for like a 300-pound guy, a broad jump of 8.5, that's not great. That's actually, and his vertical is like 26. That's not great. But based off of what I saw, I like the way that he uses his leverage to kind of control the point of attack. And I really like his upper body strength. I think that he does a really good job of kind of controlling offensive linemen. So I think that's great. I think that his ability to get into the backfield is a little bit worrisome because it's not just sacks; it's also pressures. He just didn't really do a lot there. But his stack and shed, or I shouldn't say stack, but his block shedding is really good. He knows how to bring down a ball carrier when he gets his hands on him. I think as a 5th round pick at nose tackle, just in a vacuum, this is a pretty decent pick. Now it's still, I think, a reach by the board if I want to take a quick look at that. But just like, oh, no, it's not. It was actually a steal by the board. And so for a 5th round pick as a nose tackle, I think that this is pretty good. I just don't see the Vikings needing one after having both Harrison Phillips and Khyiris Tonga like on the team. It just feels like you're losing opportunities to make that defensive line really effective. So as a player and as a pick in general, I like it. As a player for the Vikings, I'm a little bit more concerned.
Next up, round 5, we finally get a quarterback. The quarterback of the future, number 164, Jaron Hall, quarterback from BYU.
I know Luke Braun likes this pick a lot. I don't like it nearly as much as he does, but I don't hate it, which is an interesting change of pace for me and Luke Braun.
Ringing endorsement with the comparison between the two of you.
Yeah, right. So, okay, I'll start off with my concerns and then go into the reasons that, it's worth liking a lot. So he is, I think, the oldest player that they drafted, 25 years old, on the day of the draft, 25 years old, right? Because he turned 25 like a month before the draft. Yeah, like a month before the draft, March 24th. So that is a concern for all the reasons that I mentioned, age with Mekhi Blackman. He is less raw than Blackman, so that's nice. So the age is a little bit less of a concern in that context. But man, this guy gets hurt all the time. So he's missed a lot of time, some of it not related to injury. He served for his first 2 years on a religious mission, BYU, right? And so that, accounts for some of that age issue, redshirted in 2018. But in 2019, he missed 5 games due to multiple concussions. In 2020, he had a medical redshirt because of a hip injury that he suffered before the beginning of the season. He missed a couple of games in 2021 because of a core injury. Then he missed a bowl game in 2022 because of an ankle injury. Now, missing a bowl game, less concerning to me. The threshold for missing a bowl game by injury is much lower because players are considering sitting out of bowl games anyway. And so it takes a little bit less for you to opt out of the bowl game. But a lot of injuries, and the injuries don't kind of really relate to each other. Like a concussion is not going to make you more likely 2 years later to suffer a core injury. Also, I think the core injury involved his ribs too. It wasn't just a sports hernia. And so, it's not like the hip injury led to the rib injury, led to the ankle injury, led to the concussions or anything like that. The timeline of that is wrong. But it is that I think it is a style of play. Now, he is a rush capable quarterback. I don't want to say he's like a rushing quarterback, but he's capable of being an effective runner. He had nearly 800 yards rushing in college. And an important note is that rush yards in college by the NCAA count aren't really the same because the NCAA includes sacks as rush attempts and sack yardage lost as rushing yardage lost. I have no idea why they do that. And it seems like a pretty simple problem to resolve, and yet they choose not to do that. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But, he's a 6'1", 6 foot tall-ish quarterback. So that's something that, like, the size is out there that you have to kind of worry about. But I think that for the most part, you don't have to, like, the size is not like a huge concern because he's built kind of like a running back. He's like 210. I think he weighed in at the combine at 207 pounds. So he's like a 210 pound quarterback that can take a couple of hits. And so that's nice to see. But that is kind of a lot of what he is. He tends to improvise a lot, and you don't know if he's going to be a backup, if he's going to be able to play that backup role with like a lot of structure. He's not going to do the things you necessarily ask him to do. But I still like him as a quarterback. I think that he demonstrates a really high degree of understanding what the offense is asking him to do. Now, the offense was pretty reliant on like play action and RPOs and stuff like that. So that's something to keep in mind. His arm strength is fine. His mechanics in the pocket are really good. He understands not to take that many sacks. So he does a pretty good job of like throwing the ball away. And he's, he's like well regarded as like a team leader and stuff like that. I mean, that's not a bad thing to have ever. I know that Kwesi said that he watched like a bunch of his YouTube interviews and stuff like that just to see kind of what his general presence was, which, sure, whatever, right? Like whatever, use whatever information you have access to. Kind of weird, but use whatever information you have access to. But like, it is, he has like a lot of the fundamental qualities that you want in a pretty good quarterback. And I think that he might be able to challenge, maybe even immediately, Nick Mullins for that backup role. Now, he doesn't, like, when he throws deep, it's not always there for him. I don't think that's an arm strength thing. I think that just his deep ball accuracy is not great. And I think that when he's improvising, that accuracy is not always there either. And so that's, something to kind of, keep in mind. Obviously, he relied a lot on his athleticism, and he didn't really take care of himself, physically, with that in mind. But I think that when you kind of separate out the injury portion of it, he's a pretty good runner. And maybe that athleticism is not necessarily going to translate, but he's a pretty good runner. And he generally did a pretty decent job taking care of the football. So I kind of like him. It's just these other concerns bother me. I think that he reads defenses pretty well. It's tough in that offense to get a good handle on that, but based on what we can tell, I think that he read defenses pretty well. I think he's pretty accurate. I think his mechanics are pretty good. And I think he gets rid of the ball really quickly, and he's got a good pocket presence. It's really hard to find that late in the draft. It's just all of these other things are, bothersome.
Well, let's talk about the final pick of the draft, a running back that people are absurdly high on for a round 7 pick. Round 7, number 222, Dwayne McBride, running back out of UAB.
I found it funny that like other people are high on him because like when he was picked, I was like immediately jazzed about it. I don't think I tweeted about it at all because I was just too busy doing national stuff. But like this is my favorite pick of the draft, and so I guess I'm going to fall into the non-contrarian crowd here for a moment. This guy kind of rules. I don't know, like when you watch him play, he's just good. And I saw a bunch of people tweet about like some of the advanced stats afterwards. Which like, okay, I'm glad that they validate my opinion, I guess is what I'm going to say, because it's kind of fun to talk about it in that way. But before any of that, I got to say, like, I have a friend from UAB that keeps on telling me about this dude. He was telling me about this dude in September, right? He's like, this guy's the best running back in the FBS. And he goes to UAB, right? And so it's just like, all right, whatever, dude. And then this guy misses like the first game of the season or something. And I'm like, okay, cool. I don't have to worry about this. And he's like, no, he's the best running back in the draft. He's the best running back in the draft. Tell the people at Pro Football Network that this guy is better than Bijan. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell them that. This is crazy. Get out of here. Get out of my phone. And he's like, okay, you're right, Arif. He's probably not better than Bijan, but he's the best running back in the draft. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like those sentences don't work. And he's like, you got to watch him. I watched him and he rules. He's not better than Bijan, but he rules. And some of the stats that have come out, I think Krauser quote tweeted a stat that I think PFF put together. I think it was like an Arjun Menon tweet where Dwayne McBride was, I think, second in yards per carry on perfectly blocked runs and first in yards per carry on non-perfectly blocked runs. Cool. That kind of matches what I saw. He's got a bunch of school records. He was first in the FBS in rushing yards per game. He didn't work out, but you kind of get the whole, you get an understanding of who he is just generally. Like he's not a speedster. He's not going to run a 4.3. He's not going to, have these 40-yard touchdown runs at an NFL level. He's going to get caught from behind, but his contact balance, which I've mentioned on the show a number of times, his contact balance is remarkable. I mentioned that I like contact balance, like out of all the running back traits the most. Remarkable contact balance. And so he can take hits on from a variety of angles. He can take hits on from a variety of force metrics, and he has the ability to run through defensive tackles or through safeties. And it's really cool to see. He has a pretty decent footwork for getting through creases. He's got, a really great understanding of what the blocking is attempting to accomplish for him, which I think is a kind of an underrated trait. I think a lot of people kind of connect that to vision, but I think it's more anticipating. And And he does a pretty good job of pressing lanes. Like, you don't see this in seventh round running backs a lot, where when you press a lane, what you do is you're essentially faking going in to one lane and then heading out of it. And that allows, or that forces defenders to get into that lane and opens up another lane for you later. Adrian Peterson was astounding at that. The fact that this guy does it as a seventh round pick is pretty cool. But yeah, it's he's just a really tough runner that really does a great job of lowering his pads into contact, that does a really great job of understanding kind of what needs to be done in order to get yards. I described him on the podcast in the Minnesota Football Party as a guy that'll get you 7 yards when all you've been blocked for is 4. And it was kind of cool to later see that statistic tweeted out, that essentially that does turn out to be the case. The thing is, he wasn't used at all in the passing game, like, period. Like, he wasn't used as a pass protector. He got 2 receptions in his final. Like, he had 235 touches in his final year. He was that offense, and he had 2 receptions. 2 of those 235 touches were receptions. He's not used in the passing game. Now, Adolfo Mensa says that, the running backs coach that the Vikings have is in contact with a ton of running backs coaches all around the NFL and in college, and they do a quote-unquote really good job of figuring out what your capabilities are for these tasks that you didn't perform a lot, and finding out ways to figure out whether or not he's going to be good at catching the ball. Now, people have made the mistake in the past of pointing to running backs that don't have many catches in college and saying they can't catch the ball pretty well. It has happened before where those guys actually turn out to be pretty good receivers. And it's interesting who we apply to and who we don't. Jerick McKinnon never caught the ball at Georgia Southern because he was a quarterback. And so we just kind of projected that he'd be good at catching the ball because of his body type and the style of play that the Vikings wanted to use him for, and he wasn't good at that. We thought that Dalvin Cook was great at catching the ball. He's okay at it. So it is pretty tough, but you don't want to say he can't do it, but you want to say we don't really have much evidence, and I'm not going to really rely too much on that. But then again, he's a 7th round pick, so I like him a lot. It's tough to see him make the team with all the running backs the Vikings have. They're probably going to cut Dalvin Cook post June 1st, so there's going to be some room. But this is not reporting. I'm just guessing. But because they couldn't trade him, right? A group of Alexander Madison and Ty Chandler and Kenny Nwangwu, and is he going to be the 4th running back? Is he going to be a fullback for them? I don't know. So that'll be tough. I like him a lot. There's a lot of reasons to be like, what's going on here? I mean, UAB is not the Power 5, right? So you've got to figure out kind of how it translates, and he doesn't have top end speed, but I think that there's a spot for him, and I think that this is why everyone's really excited about him. Now, remember, everyone was also excited about undrafted free agent Rock Thomas, and that didn't turn into anything. So who knows?
So it does bring up the question, since we're done talking about the picks, just looking at potential starters and all of that, you have to think that it's going to be an interesting little battle between wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 this year with KJ Osborne. And there's some questions about depth on corner as far as where everyone's going to go. Anyone else from the list look like they're ready to potentially be playing this year?
Like on the list of undrafted free agents?
Well, before we get to undrafted free agents, we're talking about the draft picks themselves.
Yeah, so aside from Addison, the runway to playing this year is pretty tough for all of these guys. Obviously, the 7th round pick that I just talked up, it's not going to be there. I don't think Jaquelin Roy has a lot of competition to start. I mean, it's Kairos Tonga and Jonathan Bullard. So there's an opportunity for him to win a competition there and start as a 5th rounder, which is kind of nice. I don't see where Jay Ward fits in as a potential starter. I do see him rotating in for maybe 5-10 snaps a game. And then Mekhi Blackman, I don't know. I think that as a 3rd round pick, he's probably got a good shot, but I think that it's pretty reasonable to estimate that a Caleb Evans could outcompete him for a spot, and potentially Joanne Williams, but I think people are a little bit too high on him. But yeah, this is there's only 6 players, so you got to keep that in mind. But this is a class where maybe you only produce 1 year 1 starter, and that's probably fine. Again, Jaquelin Roy probably has the best pathway to being the other starter, but I don't think the other ones really have a ton of it. I think Blackman has a decent pathway, but I don't see it for the other picks.
Well, let's talk about the UDFAs, because the Vikings had 15 undrafted free agents, and one of which has already had a bit of a contract.
Yeah, so something like $340,000 guaranteed or something like that for Andre Carter II from Army. It is like kind of interesting because the consensus board, like very often, the top player on the consensus board that doesn't get drafted, who ends up becoming, a highly coveted undrafted free agent, they don't usually earn the highest contract out of all the UDFAs. They usually earn a pretty good one. But like very often it's like just some other guy that ranked 350th on the consensus board or something, like, which, good for them. But this guy like crushed UDFA in terms of contracts. And so he was able to secure a really big contract right away. He was the highest rated player, like I mentioned, on the consensus board. He's pretty interesting. So he in 2021 was second in the FBS in sacks. He's got pretty good length. He tested I think at 3-cone really, really well. He didn't test at like the 40-yard dash amazingly well. And a lot of people have mentioned that like, his combine hurt him. And maybe, he didn't really do much at the combine. So he measured in with 33 3/8 inch arms. He had 256 pounds of weight. He was 6'6", so it's kind of looks a little bit lean on him. Mind you, at West Point, there are just regulations on how big you can be, so that's something to keep in mind. But like a pretty decent wingspan at 81 inches. His vert was not great at 30. His broad jump was not great at 9.1. His short shuttle was not great at 4.3. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great at 4.36. And so people are saying that he's got a bad combine, and I don't really think that's the case. And his workouts were pretty good at the pro day. So at his pro day, he ran a 6.97 3-cone at 256 pounds. That's fantastic. It's also the drill that like projects edge rushers. There's no better drill for predicting a specific position than there is for 3 cones for edge rushers. It is really great how closely that aligns to success. Now, as an undrafted free agent, his odds are still low. But given that the Vikings basically guaranteed his contract, he's almost certainly making the team. And his like 1.65 second 10-yard split isn't bad either. So he doesn't have some. I think the bigger issue was the fact that the rules about, service academy kids playing in the NFL always seem to change, even within the same administration. Some people bring up the Senior Bowl, where he got absolutely destroyed at the Senior Bowl, and that probably plays a role. But like, I can't imagine that it is an overwhelming factor. His 2022 was not as good from a production standpoint as his 2021. I think that plays a bigger factor. And so that is something to kind of keep in mind, is that he didn't seemingly improve over time. He does have a strength issue, which is why he got beat up at the Senior Bowl. But I think that as an undrafted free agent, there's just like a lot to like here. Great at forcing fumbles, gets bad passes at the line of scrimmage, which you don't see a lot. Generally does a great job creating tackles for loss. Statistically, there is something to like here. And I found with edge rushers, if you take a look at their best year, not their most recent year or their totals, but take a look at their best year, that helps you project the most. And 18.5 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 3 batted passes, all of those are really astounding. And that helps you, I think, a lot. So that's like, those are all kind of things. I don't really know why he went undrafted, but he's probably the guy that most people are most excited about. And I think given that contract number, fairly so. There's also a guy that was 4th on the consensus board left among undrafted free agents that they got grabbed. Ivan Pace Jr., a 230-pound, 5'10 linebacker. And 5'10 is probably the reason he didn't get drafted, because he's really short for a linebacker. But he's not undersized in the same way. He's 230 pounds. I think his pro day was 220 pounds. Ran pretty fast, had okay explosion. You would have liked to see a little bit more. Had okay agility. You would like to see a little bit more. But he played really well at both Cincinnati and Miami of Ohio. He led so at Miami of Ohio in 2021, he led the MAC in tackles. At Cincinnati in 2022, he led the AAC in tackles and tackles for loss. He was the AAC Defensive Player of the Year, a unanimous All-American. He played really well. And it's just a really projection concern for him. The first thing everyone seems to talk about with him is like how great his attitude is, which is cool. He can overrun plays, like the whole thing about him, working twice as hard or whatever. That's all probably true, but it can result in situations where he's, overdoing it or overrunning the arc or whatever. But he was an edge rusher for a short period of time at Miami of Ohio, and he still has all those skills. And so I think the Vikings perceive him as somebody that's got the ability to really do a great job blitzing, and he has like actual off-ball linebacker experience where he was decent in coverage, great against the run, great downhill. I think he's going to be a really great, a great potential special teamer. I think that's going to be like where he like really shines, especially given kind of who he's supposed to be. But I do think that he's got an opportunity to potentially work his way up to starter. I don't know how many 5'10" linebackers there are that start in the NFL. It can't be that many, and his length is a concern. But he did all right from a coverage standpoint. His athleticism is there to play coverage really well. And he blows up bigger people than him all the time in the pass game and in the run game. So I understand why he didn't get drafted. That actually makes sense to me. Given his big board range, I should be more surprised he didn't get drafted, but honestly, not that much. But I think there's a lot to like here. And those are the two that I would like isolate. Malik Knowles from Kansas State is pretty interesting. I really like getting returners that have running back and receiver experience. But the Vikings grabbed a lot of guys that were top 400 on the expanded big board. So you got Malik Knowles, you got Ben. So Malik Knowles is a receiver from Kansas State. He used to play running back. You've got Ben Sims, a tight end. You've got Alan Ali from Texas Christian. You've got Calvin Avery from Illinois. Alan Ali is an offensive lineman. Calvin Avery is a defensive tackle. And yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the best undrafted free agent classes in the NFL this year. And it's kind of cool because some of these players that kind of stand out are positions where the Vikings have a short path for them in the next 2 years to really make an impact.
And in what is becoming a tradition around here, we're splitting our draft episode in two. Yes, that's right. We're hearkening back to the old days where we did part 2 of like nearly every episode for like a year and a half. It was incredibly annoying to edit. It was incredibly annoying to like try to figure out how many episodes we have, but by God, we're going to do it. So that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back a little later this week with the mailbag portion, which is going to cover all sorts of things, including discussions on the consensus board, discussions on on-field metrics, and discussions on, well, I acquired a grill through questionable means, and we're gonna have to discuss it with Don from Ohio. So, we'll be back later this week. Hope you guys enjoy it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.